We have probably never met, but I'm going to make a bold claim here, and that is you need more conflict in your workplace. So conflict at work is inevitable. Many people think that a conflict-free workplace is the goal. Now, at the risk of having you stop watching and looking at another video, let me just say this: that attitude is wrong. Conflict in a workplace is actually good and it's healthy. So the question isn't whether there's going to be conflict in your workplace. The question is, how are you going to handle it? If you work with other people and there isn't any conflict, you have some serious problems. And if you're sitting here thinking, wait a minute, I don't think we have conflict in my workplace, then let me just invite you to take a step back. Because when I talk about conflict, I don't mean some kind of open, notorious, mean-spirited fighting.
To be clear, okay?
For my purposes, conflict is what happens when two or more people have a disagreement about something. Maybe it's about how to execute a strategy. Maybe it's about how to agree on an advertising budget. Maybe it's about who is the best candidate to hire for the head of human resources. The presence of conflict, that is, differences between individuals that needs to be worked out, is actually a sign of a very healthy workplace. The only workplaces where there is no conflict are ones where everyone thinks the same way, or, even worse, where there is so much fear that no one ever dare disagree openly with the people in charge. So today, I'm going to share strategies for how to best handle conflict in the workplace. And at the end of this video, you can expect to be feeling better about conflict in your workplace, and, importantly, you'll feel better at actually handling it effectively. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute, and I work to help folks navigate conflict in their workplaces all the time. Okay, so before we jump into the video, I want to hear from you. Pop into the comments and let me know what types of things you have noticed that help you better manage or resolve conflicts in your own workplace. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Okay, so today I'm going to share 3 key tips for better addressing conflict in the workplace. The first one is really important, and it's really reframing your own thinking about conflict. If you are watching this video right now, congratulations, because it means you either have survived or are surviving the worst workplace conflict you've ever been in, and that is worth celebrating. So I guess what I want you to be thinking about here is that conflict is not something that destroys you. In fact, conflict is a way in which we grow stronger as individuals, and here's even a stronger claim. Conflict is the source of almost all really good ideas. So we have this idea in our society that somehow, if you're in a conflict, things have gone wrong. And what I want to say is, if you're in a conflict, it means things are going right. It means people who have different ideas, different views, different perspectives are putting those ideas forward. Where things can go wrong is how do people handle the conflict. So I think you have to make a mindset shift that conflict isn't poison, that conflict isn't something to run away from, that it isn't something to be avoided, but that with the proper skills and the proper attitude, it's a source of vibrancy and you can actually handle it well. If you make that internal mindset shift, you're going to already be eons ahead of your other colleagues in the office. So the second thing that will really help you handle conflict better is getting the zero-sum gremlin out of your head. One of the things that I have learned through my work is that folks in a conflict are often operating from a fear or zero-sum assumption. This idea that anything I get is something you lose, and anything you get is something I lose. And that assumption about conflict and negotiation is really fundamentally untrue. Truth of the matter is that every conflict offers at least some opportunities where if we can work with each other, if we could understand what's really important to each other, both of us can actually do better for ourselves. Now, some of the ways that we can do this, sometimes it's extending the time frame. Sometimes it's really thinking creatively out of the box. But the idea here is that if we can focus on the merits of the problem and not suddenly see the other person as difficult or impossible, we can often create some additional value in that negotiation. Third key shift here is really around preparation. So when I think about preparation, often what people end up doing is they think about what is my argument, what is my position, and how can I somehow vanquish them or win. I want to invite you to do something differently. I want you to think not so much about your position, but take a step back. What are the real interests, the real things that are important to you here? What are the things that you might think are driving them? What is important to them? Not their position, but why do they have that position? Once you understand this set of underlying needs or interests or concerns, that actually then gives you an opportunity to think about, almost if you were a mediator or if you were somehow an all-knowing being, what are some solutions that can actually meet what's important to you and what's important to the others in that negotiation or conflict. The other thing I want you to think about as you prepare is if you are going to offer an idea or a possibility or a solution to the other side, think to yourself, if I were the other side and I were their lawyer or their best friend, would I advise that person to say yes to this offer? And if the answer to that question is not an unequivocal yes, then don't make that suggestion. Your preparation work has to be making sure that you are giving the other side a choice that if you were them, you would say yes to or advise them to say yes to. Related to this on preparation is working with a friend or a colleague or a coach. One of the great gifts of the work that I do is coaching folks through their most contentious, most challenging conflicts. One of the things a colleague or a coach or a friend can give is new ideas, a fresh perspective, a chance for practice.
No, I think two heads are better than one. I suppose so.
Related to this is considering something that I call a role reversal. So before I go into that negotiation or that conflict, putting myself literally into the shoes of the other person and then mocking the negotiation where someone is playing me and I am playing the other person. And noting every time I feel angry, every time I want to retort back, every time I want to say no, every time you feel that when you're in the shoes of the other person means that you need to shift your approach and you need to shift your argument. Let me give you an example. Some years ago, I was working with a client entering a series of negotiations with another entity where they were going to renegotiate some understandings that had gone wrong. And this client kept on calling all of the issues that they were going to be negotiating erroneous interpretations. And so I said to the client, why are you calling it an erroneous interpretation? And they said, well, because the interpretation that we've been using for the past few years is wrong. Like, okay, but what does the other side think? And they said, well, they think it's a correct interpretation. I said, yeah, your initial framing of erroneous interpretation already is going to make them angry. You need to say this in a different way. Like, here's the reason why the way we've interpreting this, we think, is leaving value on the table. Or we think isn't meeting our interests as well as it could. But framing it as an erroneous interpretation already sets up the other side to be in a defensive stance. Fourth, once you've prepared, you want to pick the right time and place to actually handle this conflict. So what does that mean? First important piece here is actually scheduling a negotiation or a series of conversations. Don't surprise them with it. Surprise! Sometimes people say, oh, well, isn't it better to get the other side off guard? The answer to that is probably not. When folks are off guard, they get defensive and they get emotional. Secondly, and this is really important around time and place, give them time to prepare for the negotiation as well. It is better to negotiate with someone who understands their interests and what's important to them. Related to this, in advance of working through the issues, send them a proposed agenda. here's what I think we should be talking about. Here's what I think the time should be. Here's what I think we should do in this particular meeting. Prepared negotiators are in a much better place to handle issues professionally, creatively, and efficiently. What I often tell people is, as part of the conversation, say up front, it doesn't need to be one and done. Meaning, this might be the first of several conversations for us to work this through. Lastly, really relates to managing expectations. Handling conflict is really hard. So you should go in expecting mistakes. Saying up front, I'm new to handling this, I'm new to working this through, I'll probably make some mistakes. I hope you'll be gracious. Also, by the way, if you make mistakes, fine with me.
We all make mistakes, Ono.
In conflict situations, we can often be really emotional, and creating space for do-overs, creating space for mistakes, helps lower the stakes and allows us to come back and reapproach things when maybe it gets a little bit hot under the collar. Okay, a quick recap. Conflict in the workplace is a good thing. There are 5 steps that you can take to increase the likelihood you'll get successful outcomes. First, reframe your own thinking about conflict. This is not something to be afraid of, it's something to embrace. Secondly, get rid of that zero-sum gremlin in your head. Conflicts are an opportunity to create value. Third, prepare, prepare, prepare. What's important to you? What's important to them? What are some ideas that can meet both of your interests? Is what you're saying and offering to them an easily yesable proposition? Fourth, set the right time and place. Give them the opportunity to prepare and be ready for the conversation. And 5, expect mistakes. It's not one and done. Conflict is hard to work through. It can be scary, but it shouldn't be avoided. When there are mistakes, you could always do a redo and a reset. Okay, sometimes you're not the one in conflict, but there's a lot of conflict in the workplace. Stay tuned for this next video, which is how to mediate a conflict at work. Before you go, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new helpful negotiation video from me. Okay, it's not difficult to keep watching. Click, click.